Good evening, all, and welcome to, I guess, our staff's budget hearings. Please just make sure that you talk into the microphones, and I'll remind my fellow council people to speak into the microphone. People are eagerly listening at home.
I'm sure.
Are we not following the schedule?
We have a slight alteration. We're putting on planning first. So he has to go somewhere very important, so we're allowing to switch.
Yes.
What page are we on?
We are on page 109. When 110 is the actual numbers. This budget has undergone a transition over the last year. There is reconfiguration of the department head and also elimination of one clerical position. So you'll notice that the proposed budget is about 80,000, 82,000 less than last year's budget. It reflects the attempt to try to cut costs where we think we can do it. I would tell you that I have the building inspector behind me, and he's not in agreement with that cut of the clerical person, so I might as well get it out there. It wasn't unanimous. It's never unanimous when you have to eliminate a person. I would vote against it if I didn't need to downsize the budget somewhat. We try to look strategically when we make these eliminations, but we're pretty lean now as far as personnel. So any cut does affect the department to an extent. And this department is no different. Other than that, this budget is status quo among the other line items. We have our planner here, and we'll take any questions that you might have.
School?
Good evening. Thank you for being here. No disrespect to Mrs. Rhodes, but I would like to ask Mr. Troger 2 questions, if that's all right.
That's why he's here.
Okay.
But he needs to come up to the microphone.
Well, I was giving him a minute.
Oh, well. See, I'm moving him along a little bit quicker.
Test.
Very good.
Question 1. We have 2 big projects going on right now, Panema Mills and the hotel at Maplewood Cemetery, or in the vicinity of Maplewood Cemetery. About how many hours a week does your department spend on inspections or activities at those 2 projects?
My assistant, Greg Arpin, who is doing the hotel project, schedules 2 hours a day at that facility to keep up with it. Panema Mills, I'm spending, well, I'm doing most of the inspections there right now, and when I go over, it's a minimum of 2 hours, and that's a minimum of 3 times a week. We've asked for special inspectors over there on several items. The fire stopping we could not keep up with. They got ahead of us. They're having some problems with sequencing of operations, and they get ahead of themselves, and we have problems. We've had to have meetings with the architect on the project. So it would be better if we could spend more time there, but we just can't seem to spend that much time over there with the personnel that we have right now, if that's your question.
Okay, and my second question And the city manager just spoke about the loss of your code enforcement secretary in your department. Could you just give us a little idea of what that will do to your department if this cut remains in place?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so I can't say what will happen. My feelings are, again, my feelings, we've had an emphasis, we rearranged the seating in there to try and accommodate more customer service so that people could be addressed immediately as they walk through the door. And with the fact that right now there's only 2 inspectors, we're trying to keep somewhat in the office. I do most of my inspections in the morning, and Greg does his inspections in the afternoon, although there is multiple exceptions to that. And well, for instance, Greg wasn't in today, so I was out most of the day. So as far as people walking in and getting immediate service, it's a problem, and losing the secretary in that position will make it even more of a problem because there will be less people to accommodate immediate service to people walking through the door. And it's going to be the same situation out there. If we cut it back to 2 secretaries in that area, they have vacation time, they have time out, they have lunch, so there will be many, many times where there'd probably be 1 person in that office to accommodate anybody that walks through the door, as well as answering phones. I kept track of the secretary's phone frequency for the last couple of days, and 2 days ago she had 40 phone calls she had to address and explain things to. So she spends a lot of time answering the phone, scheduling inspections. How that's going to work, I don't know, but I can't help but think that customer service is going to suffer when she leaves, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to give it, may I just, no, go ahead, go first. Go first.
Mr. Trowbridge, can you tell me the estimated completion date of the hotel?
An accurate answer is no. They are hoping to be occupied somewhat in the fall. I think Deanna may have more of a handle on that than I, but the upper 2 floors are completely sheetrocked. They're moving along fast. They're making very good progress. In fact, the mayor did you do a visit out there?
I haven't gone out lately.
Greg has been pretty much exclusively on that project, but I'm told that they were hoping to he doesn't think they're going to make the schedule they were shooting for, but I would think that there should be some occupancy there in the fall.
Okay, so once that's completed, that will free up it will free him up for other inspections when the project is complete.
If it's complete, well, I'm not sure it'll be 100% complete by then. He should have partial occupancy, but technically you're correct. Once the project is done, we should require a lot less inspection time.
Okay,
Yes.
and the same question for Panema Mills. I just read in the paper that we were fortunate enough to get another, $6.1 million, but that will be for Phase 2, I assume?
Right.
So what is the estimated completion date for Phase 1?
For Phase 1,
Or whatever one we're in right now?
yeah, regardless of what time that's done, that's going to be ongoing for the next, in my estimation, the next several years, because they'll go from one phase into the next phase into the next phase. We had looked into, and the city manager can probably address it, we looked into hiring a contractor inspector. We had 2 people that were somewhat interested, and by the time they calculated what the errors and omissions insurance was going to cost them, they said they would have to charge us about $100 an hour to do those inspections. So that's been put on the back burner at this point in time. We're hoping to have another full-time inspector midsummer, and probably he can take up a lot of that slack as far as inspection time.
And that new inspector would be to replace someone who's retiring?
Well, George Gardner retired in November, I think it was, so we've been down to 2 inspectors since that time, and the 4th one retired last spring when Joe East retired. So from 4, we're down to 2 inspectors right now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Troger, in '08, our community, as well as many other communities, had a real hit as far as what our economy did. And do you feel that from '08 till now and going forward, that the people applying for applications or building permits has it appreciated in our community?
I think that it has, and it's going to continue that way. In fact, discussing this with Deanna, parties that are interested in purchasing some downtown properties will in fact generate a lot of inspection work if that happens in the rehab. And again, I don't want to bring up Reed and Hughes, but if that happens, that's going to take an awful lot of inspection time. And again, they're looking at these properties on Broadway, which will require a lot of our time.
And if these Broadway properties happen, or other things in that downtown area, are you equipped with staff to take care of them on a timely basis, as we should be showing good customer service to people coming into the community?
Well, I'm going to say we'll never have enough staff to handle all that, but the question is, to what degree would we be able to oversee those projects? And with the less staff we have, we won't be able to do as competent a job as if we had people dedicated to those. We're getting spread very thin, is my point.
And one other quick question. If you're not doing the appropriate job, and we're not monitoring it the way that we should be, what happens? What's the downside of what we're talking about here?
We would miss, once a job gets a certain size, the architect is required to fill out what they call a statement of special inspection. So a lot of the responsibility for the major code items can get handed off to the special inspector, and then the architect of record has to sign off at the end. So he does have responsibilities. The day-to-day things, and I can bring up a sore subject, but we did have these kind of problems when they did the Cove View Towers. We just weren't there enough to be able to monitor everything that was going on, and there were problems that happened due to lack of inspections. So if later on, if code deficiencies are discovered by, say there's an accident and an attorney sends in a code specialist and say, why wasn't this addressed? Why wasn't that addressed? We're going to look pretty poor saying, well, we didn't notice, we didn't see it. I mean, there's errors and omissions type things that that happen if we can't be on the job as often as we should be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? One of the things I think, oh, go ahead.
Mr. Traeger, thank you for being here tonight. I have a couple questions. Typically, when you do an inspection, you say when somebody spends 2 hours on a job doing inspections, what's the clerical time involved with after the fact of that inspection back in the office to do paperwork and clear up administrative duties? What's typically attached to 2 hours worth of inspections?
Theoretically, not much. We've adopted this new computer program, WAGSI, and we record. Greg and I both have a system on site over. He's got it at the hotel, and I've got it. We get done with a certain inspection,
Yep.
and we record that right on there. We've got records for each individual room there, and that inspection gets recorded in that book. So the contractor has a copy of it. We have a copy of it. We record it back in our computer program, this WAGSI program, of what we looked at, when we looked at, and was it approved or did it fail. So there's record keeping that's involved, but not much of it is on the secretarial staff.
Okay, so you're saying that with some of these larger projects being demanding, like Panema Mills, when they'll start, bringing up the pace of the job as their funding arrives, so to speak, you figure more hours of the day will be have to be allocated to that particular project.
To
than what
do
you're
a
doing
competent
now.
job of inspecting, for instance, if I may, we had a lot of problems to begin with fire stopping.
Yes, I'm aware of fire stopping.
And plumbers have to do fire stopping, the electricians have to do fire stopping, all the trades have got they were all using a different product, which wasn't good. They had submittals on what the fire stopping procedure should supposed to be, and there's thousands of penetrations there that needed to be inspected. Early on, it was pretty evident there's no way we could look at them all, so we demanded that they get a special inspector to do that, and they did, although we're having trouble getting reports from the special inspector, but we still go over and we look at a percentage of them. There's no way we can look at them all, and we have found some deficiencies that the special inspector didn't pick up, but between our department and the fire marshal's office, that's considered a very important item in that type of building, is preventing the spread of fire from unit to unit. So it's an important item that needs to be looked at, and like I say, there's thousands of them, so, and we're going through room by room by room, and it's time-consuming.
Yeah. It is, but usually a job follows a certain process, and, you know, when guys are going to be roughing in the mechanicals, I mean, it's a certain process, you know, plumbers, HVAC, the last electrician. And at that point in time, I think that once all those three guys pass, are you guys fire stopping inspection for the HVAC inspections in one shot? And then you're coming back for the plumbing inspections, fire stopping, and another stop? And are you coming back again to that same room to doing the electrical fire stopping?
Sometimes we have, I mean, we do electrical rough-in, I mean, it's trade. Plumbing requires pressure tests being witnessed and all that
Yes.
stuff. We try and get one room so that we can look at several of the items while we're there in that particular room and sign off it. So we say all the fire stuff means we looked at the plumbing and the electrical and the HVAC. But many times it fails, so it requires return trip, and we don't sign off on it. So it's a lot of time involved.
Yeah, now, when they spec'd out the fire stopping for that job, didn't the architect call out a specific fire stopping that he wanted to use, or did he specify an equivalent?
Each trade was required to submit a UL-listed fire stopping procedure that they were going to do and the project. It gets reviewed by the architect and approved by the architect, and we also look at it. And then that list of penetration treatments is given to the special inspector now, and he may have to do a little bit of, like, what is it, destructive. He has to dig into it to see if the proper thicknesses are there. There's a lot to look at. So, but answer your question, we try and package as much as we can while we're there, so we can minimize our visits to that particular room.
Now, how long you been in the building department now?
Since '94.
How many years, approximately? 20-something?
23.
Are there any efficiencies that you can identify in your department that, maybe equipment that you don't have that could help you perform your duties in a more efficient and less time-consuming manner? Do you have all the tools that you need to do the job as efficiently as possible is what I'm trying to ask.
Short of personnel,
Short of personnel at this point in time, yeah.
I can't think of one thing right now off the top of my head that I would say we desperately need. We've got the vehicles to get back and forth, and we've got certain amount of tools, flashlights and that type of thing. It's an inspection process. I don't know how it could really be shortened.
Well, the thing that I look at is seem to have like probably peaks, you know, on certain projects when certain projects peak out because of the process that they're along in, and then there's other times where not so much. Sounds like you're just stretched out to the limit now.
What helps lots of times on a bigger project is we do have architects and engineers involved, and as far as the chances of the plans being correct, code compliant, are better when you've got a professional designer. We get people walking in all the time that are going to put a deck on the back of the house. They have no idea what they do, and we have to. We can either say, you know, get out, go find a designer, or we try and help them with it. We try and make corrections. If you do this, it'll be all right. The rise and the run on the stairs is no good. You should see some of the drawings we get. They make no sense at all. So it's time involved in working with the customer to try and be somewhat customer-friendly and help them accomplish what the project they're trying to get done. But little projects can be very time-consuming compared to the economies of scale on a larger project.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I think of the planning department as a very, it's kind of a money-making department in our city. It brings builders into the city that we can deal with, and people who want to put additions on that we can deal with. And I think we've been very generous with permitting costs on some of these projects. And the other department that would go with that would be the assessor's office, and I also look at that as a money-making asset of this community. And what kind of a lag time do we have from your department of issuing a CO to the time it actually gets down to the time when we can actually assess it for a tax?
You should ask the assessor that question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyone can jump on this, it's fine.
I know that, in our office, as soon as...
Can you bring the
I-
mic closer to you?
Sure. For most things that need a certificate of occupancy, they need a certificate of zoning compliance first, which is through my office, or at this point, I'm the zoning enforcement officer, but the zoning enforcement officer is responsible for that. And so as soon as that is issued, I know that there's a quick time frame from that procedure into getting the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, and then that information gets forwarded onto the assessors. I'm not sure what that lag time, if it's a day or two, but as soon as paperwork gets done, we usually send, we send a lot of packages back and forth to the city hall every day. I'm not sure when that gets picked up from the assessor's office and actually gets assessed, because I know that certain times of the year, obviously, that they can assess properties and things. So, but our office is pretty efficient, I think, as far as doing that paperwork and sending it along.
Okay. Do you feel your department can comfortably cut back 5% of your budget?
Well, that would be a big hit. I'll be honest with you. That would be a huge hit. I looked at the different things today and said, where could those things be cut? I don't see that. I think we really need to fill the building official position that's vacant right now. I think that's really important. We have a light officer right now, and I would want to keep that for the city. I think it's a really important position. We have to have a zoning enforcement officer for staffing. I mean, we do the best we can with efficiency, and I have sent recently all the administrative staff, the 3 of them, to Munis training again, which is the software that we use for the finance department, to refamiliarize them with how we do some financials. I've also been offering them more WAGSIS training, which is the building permitting software. It's actually not just building; it's all commissions and boards, wetlands, all the violations, complaints all go through this system, and it's a good way of tracking. It's how we generate our fees. Everything goes into the WAGSIS system, all the permits, and it collects the fees. So that wasn't being used to the extent that it really should be, as far as the efficiencies on that. So I have sent the 3 administrative assistants, again, for more training on WAGSIS, and they've been working pretty much one-on-one with Sandra Kuchta, which is in the finance department, and she's allocating some individual, at least 15, 20 minutes of time to each of the building officials and the secretaries. Again, in the next couple weeks, she's going to come up and just ask them to show how they're using the system, because there is some inefficiencies happening. So we all really have, I think everyone's been really stepping up. I'm pleased with the progress the office is making. We just offered a zoning enforcement officer position to someone yesterday. It was our 3rd round of interviews, and to get a candidate. He has conditionally accepted the job and would start in May. And I think that person coming on board and any new employees to learn how they use our systems to the highest availability and to really get them more self-sufficient is really important. However, we all have to pitch in. That's the way it is. I'm a firm believer in everybody's boots on the ground. We're all working and doing this together. So,
Thank you very much for your candid
If I could
responses.
could I add to that? As far as, I think your question was, how do we make a 5% cut? And I think, maybe Josh can tell you, what percentage of our budget is salaries It's a huge percentage. That, the only other things to cut would be postage and stamps and training, and there's and paper and pencils. There's very little excess that could be without eliminating a salary somewhere. That's, that would be in fact, 5% would probably take away all of our extras, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so one of the things that Jim made a good point is the training that's built into our, in our budget is, you know, for certification, the building officials have to go to a certain amount of training per year. And to keep my American Institute Certified Planner, so you have a certified planner, which is the highest level that you want to have, there's training. I go to as much free things as I can, and so does Jim. We take advantage of, but you can't get enough of your credit units by only going to, you know, a free, you know, something free. So we have to go to sometimes the conferences to bang out as many as you can in one conference so that you can, you know, almost be done. And that's what, you know, that's how I work it around. So you're not out of the office as much. You kind of hit it one time. And I think you guys do that as well. But that would be a huge hit for our department if training was taken out. I'm really grateful that the person that we offered the zoning enforcement officer position is a trained zoning enforcement officer, is already CASIO certified, which saves the city about $2,000 in 2 years of getting someone up to speed. So that's very valuable, and so I'm pleased about that. So
Great. Thank you.
I agree with Jim on that.
I'm not sure who answered. You mentioned that you have vehicles, but why then is there a 7-fold increase in your mileage from $700 to $3,500? Mileage, line 37, mileage.
Number 37.
It was 700 in 2016 budgeted, projected for 3,500, $3,500. Who drives where for that kind of money?
I think you're reading the wrong line item.
No, she's correct. 'Cause
I'm
it was
correct.
in 16-17 budget was $700, and they projected this year to be $3,500. I don't know what those numbers are close to. I have not looked at that line item where we're at this year. And I think I make an assumption because Gary Evans prepared the budget before he left, is that he just carried that same number over. What the projector was, he carried it over for what he's requesting. So I don't know how much, you know, where that number came from if finance was saying that we were going to be over on that for mileage.
And then my other part, on your contracted services, it's
Yep.
also doubled.
And I will answer that to you. Gary, I've read all of Gary's notes so I could be prepared for this meeting. So it was a $20,000 request, and previously it was $10,000. And the first $10,000, he was talking about as a result of the city. I'll read it actually to you. The request for $20,000 is derived from 2 activities. The first is as a result of the city's proactive initiative to improve the quality of life in Norwich. The increase in municipal property acquisitions as a result of foreclosures and potential through the new blight ordinances requires financial investment in services to secure and maintain the properties. $10,000 was approved in the previous year's budget, and it is believed that $10,000 will be fully exhausted by the end of 2017, requiring an additional $10,000 from 2017 to 2018. Maintaining these properties helps stabilize the tax base and will encourage and expedite resale, development, and occupancy, therefore returning the properties to the tax rolls. So it sounds as though the $10,000 from this year wasn't going to be enough to keep maintaining the properties that the city has acquired through foreclosure in preparing them for sale. The other $10,000, the second $10,000 will be used to assist in expediting the development of large-scale projects such as Panema Mills. In 2016-17, the city reduced building department staffing to an anemic level, placing tremendous pressure on staff. A development like Panema requires a full-time building official to immediately available to ensure performance benchmarks are achieved. While we cannot afford to hire permanently, retaining a contracted licensed construction agent, could be an engineer architect, to certify work will reduce the liability of the city, increase production time, leading to increased taxes on completed portions quicker, and fairly balance the remaining workload between the remaining 2.5 building officials.
And Mayor, may I just have one? Did we or did we not waive the fees for Panema Mills? We waived them. I rest my case.
I could interject again. It's always been a problem doing maintenance and board-ups on vacant properties or fire things. In the past, it's been shared between Public Works Department or we've had to hire an outside contractor to come in and do it. We've had several home improvement people doing board-ups, and the Public Works Department was becoming more and more reluctant to do maintenance or board-ups, so there was always a question where that money was coming from, and I think that's part of the reason it's thrown in the budget, so there would be a pot of money to draw from to do that. The other thing that we're using more and more in the way of professional services, all the advice and inspections that we got from, in most cases, CLA regarding the Reed and Hughes building, that it turned out to be quite a substantial sum that we always we passed it over to the manager's office or Josh to find a pot of money somewhere to pay for those because it wasn't in our budget. So there needs to be something ear tagged where these special needs funds are going to come from. If it's not going to be in our budget, you need to put them in somewhere that money could be. Maybe Josh could address that more. I don't know.
And adding on to what Jim just said, for example, and I don't want to bring up Reed and Hughes either, but I'm going to, but to say that the Reed and Hughes did not follow through, originally it was going to be demolished. Where were funds going to come from for planning the design of what would go there in its place? So that would be something under professional services that we would look at, having a consultant assist us with coming up with a concept that would work there, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a planner, whether it's a landscape architect, that would be something. So any kind of properties that the city decides they're going to say, demolish doesn't necessarily be there, we have a building we want to take down and demolish, that we need to have some pot of money. I can do some design work and work with Public Works, but we really want to have some renderings done and things like that. Those are a little bit of money that you want to then expend, and you need a pot of money, at least someplace to take that funds from. So.
Well, in closing, I thank you all. One of the things I think the council should be aware of is that we do business differently now in Norwich. We have a team. When developers come in, we meet with them so that they have one stop. The assessor comes, building inspector, the fire, Deanna comes, I go. It is starting to turn around. We've had some great purchases recently. We have some more in the pipeline. And part of it is because they no longer have to go from one office to another and try to get information. They get the right information. I think you'll hear from the assessor that oftentimes, and NCDC is part of this, oftentimes one of the questions they have is what can happen in the enterprise zone? Well, the best person to tell them that is the assessor. And so before they leave, they know exactly what kind of tax credit they can get or where it can go. The building inspectors, we have people that come and look at buildings. They can tell them right away how expensive this is going to be, what they're going to have to look for. I mean, it is really, in the last few years, and now with Deanna coming on board, she gets right in her car and drives out there with them and gives them what they're going to need for permits so that there's no surprises. The entire team, we keep in contact with each other through emails, and so if somebody reaches out, another one knows exactly what's happening. So, I encourage you to think long and hard about these, budgets as you're listening to, because it is making a difference. Thank you all very much.
Thanks. We'll go back to the schedule now, so city clerk is next. Page 68. This department has one of the few increases in staff. We've increased a half-time administrative clerk in this budget. That is major change. Other than that, the other line items are pretty much status quo.
Any questions for the city clerk? Yes.
So I always get confused about this. John, maybe you can answer. The administrative clerk is going to be shared by the city clerk and what other department? Or no other department?
The tax office.
So city and tax. So the salary of 43,529 is the total for that one person who's going to sit in two different chairs.
Correct.
So it does not appear in the tax collector's budget.
Half of that salary is in the finance budget for the tax office, and half is in the city clerk's office.
Then,
So on,
If you look at the line item where we have the actual total salaries paid by general fund, you'll see that we have $21,765, which is half the salary. And that ties out with the number, the line item on top for employees.
and then on page 58, where you'll see revenue collection clerks, you'll see 1.5 there. All the way to the right in the 2017-18 proposed column, under that subtitle staffing, you'll see 1.5 revenue collection clerks.
and who will determine, who will be the supervisor or the designated person to determine when and where this individual goes? Who will be their direct supervisor?
Both. They will have to work together to, both the city clerk and the tax collector will have to work together to establish a suitable schedule for the person in the office, knowing that there's some flexibility in it because there's some peaks and valleys with the workload, especially in the tax office.
See, I personally think that this, if I may, I think this office has been grossly understaffed for years. I mean, city revenue receives $736,000, so that they bring in some money. 100% of council minutes prepared without corrections. You know, that's a lot. That's a lot. If anybody that goes into the city clerk's office, they are the keeper of record for the entire city. And I would venture to say there isn't a day when there isn't a line there sometime. So although I'm not a big fan of increasing staff, I think this is something that is long overdue.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. You're here already. Elections is next. That's on page 109. Actually, 108.
Just make sure you two are hooked up to the microphone.
We've got access to a mic.
Thank you.
Is this one working?
Yes, just bring it a little closer to you.
We adjusted this budget, just slightly fine-tuned it, depending on history of expenditures, but generally, it's, I would call it a status quo budget, pretty much.
Any questions? Yes.
Can you explain to me what fringe benefits elected officials receive in general?
So The $8,601 of fringe benefits that's going to be basically FICA and Medicare, workers' compensation, and that's it. Yeah, so it's taking the salaries from the head of department and the seasonal temporary, and it's FICA and Medicare on that, and workers' compensation.
I would like just to say, if you
Just-
don't mind, I think we can deal with this budget at 145,786. I believe we can do this. But please keep in mind, if we end up having a double primary, it may cost more. Because if we have a double primary, we have to hire the same number of people that we hire for a presidential election. And primaries run in the vicinity of $7,000 to $10,000, depending on how many people we have to hire. And we are required by statute to hire a certain number for each election, for each precinct, for each election, and for the absentee ballot counters, and for the election day registration. So we don't have much play, control, right, over what we hire, because we are mandated to hire a certain number of people. I believe we can work within this budget. We have worked within this budget in previous years. Things don't change much for us. We haven't raised the pay for any of our workers in probably 6 years or more. It includes 1.5% increase for us, which was approved last year. Other than that, there's really not anything different that we can do. The manager did decrease the budget by almost $5,000 from what we requested. And it is that was almost $6,000 less than we used last year. So if you look at it that way, there's a substantial savings from last year. I think well over the 5% that you're looking for.
Mr. Braddock, you had a question?
No, ma'am.
No? Mr. Martin?
Typically for a primary, what's the voter turnout as far as, I mean,
Last municipal primary we had 9%, N-I-N-E% turnout.
okay. Are you required by law, to, or can I say, is there any way you can consolidate polls for primaries? So that you have to have the same amount of polls for a primary, so there's no consolidation of voting places or anything like that for a primary?
Legislature tried a few years ago to change it under the current governor so that we could have 1 or 2 polling places for primary, because it's very expensive in all of the municipalities to run primaries. And it passed the legislature and the governor vetoed it.
Big surprise. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Thank you very much.
The next budget is on page 56, and it's the city manager's budget. This budget has same amount of personnel as previous years. The only change is in the fringe benefit account, which is consistent with the other adjustments that were made by finance to include other items in the fringe benefit account. It's not that we're getting more fringe benefits this year.
Any questions of the city manager? Yes.
Mr. Salamone, one line item that was increased was the training budget. Would that be for you to be going to different conferences or meetings, et cetera, or is that for your executive assistant?
Did you say training?
Right, your training went from $2,000 to $4,500.
Well, that's projected, the
Okay.
2,000. I didn't travel much this year, so the actual budget was 4,500. So it's the same as it was the previous year.
Okay, and that's...
It is for both.
It is for both.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
Anyone else? All right, sir, you can move on.
Thank you. Next is the mayor's budget, which is on page 69. Actually, the line items are on page 70. This budget contains the salary of the mayor, the part-time salaries of the council, and one employee in the office. It also has substantial funds to fund NCDC, sector, and some of the other organizations within the city receive their funding out of this budget. Generally, it's very much a status quo budget for this year.
Any questions? Yes.
Can you tell me what the council project contingency fund is for?
Can you,
That's,
go ahead, if you want to give some examples of what we've used it for in the past.
that would be for items that aren't in the budget, that might be for marketing, for events. We use that, I believe, last year for the webpage training, some other items. So it's kind of a miscellaneous account that we use during the year, but we don't itemize it out front.
I've used it for things that I think will enhance economic development, that there's no real spot for, those kinds of things.
Okay, we'll move on then to human resources. Page 64. 65 is where the line item part of the budget is. Basically, this budget provides the human resources for the entire city, including what we recruit for and test in the area of the NPU is in here, so we do those testing. Most of the non-staff services are for testing and other type of overhead costs that are during the year we need. You have to buy tests. You have psychological testing for certain employees in the department. There's post-employment physicals. A number of things are in the professional services. Pretty much, that won't vary. It'll vary a little bit depending on how many vacancies are filled during the year, and but it doesn't vary very much. Other than that, this budget is pretty much status quo.
Any questions of human resources? No? Thank you very much.
Okay, the next budget is emergency management. I'll handle that one, page 123. The chief is ill and cannot attend tonight. It's on page, actually, the line items on page 124. Pretty much this budget is status quo with the exception of moving fringe benefits, some fringe benefits out of this budget since we no longer have a full-time emergency management person. The fire chief has assumed the duties of the emergency manager, and that's why we were able to reduce it. There is a large cost in building and grounds maintenance to fix the roof of the building, which has numerous leaks. This is the building on Franklin, right? Yeah, got my streets mixed up. That's the 17,000. We were able to fund that because of the savings on the personnel side. I'll take questions. Hopefully I can answer them.
Yes.
Thank you. In the last major hurricane that we had, I think did we not go to FEMA for funds for that roof?
I can't tell you that.
The roof wasn't, the roof had been kind of degrading over a series of years, so the damage to the roof really couldn't be connected to that event, so it wasn't really eligible for FEMA reimbursement.
Okay.
In other words, it was wear and tear, so they weren't buying it, that the storm did that. FEMA wasn't buying it.
And how much of that funding that we have for emergency management can we drive through grants? Do we have a percentage that we can?
Well, the state of Connecticut offers the Emergency Management Performance Grant. It's one of the revenues listed in the general fund revenues on page 53. So it's set at 50 cents per capita. So that, and I think they must be looking at the 2010 decennial census when they come up with the funding amount. I don't believe it fluctuates too much year to year other than the timing of reimbursements. But so we have to send in reports quarterly on the amount of salaries and fringe benefits paid, and they reimburse us a portion of it up to the amount listed on that page in the revenues.
And when we do go for grants, let's say we have a terrible storm that rolls through our community and we have a lot of damage, and we do go for grants through FEMA or from wherever, is there an administrative fee that we derive from that, or is it just?
So most of the the finance department gathers information from all the other departments. And the other departments are fantastic at getting us information timely, and sending that information into FEMA. We can get reimbursed on some of the time that I spend, or Tony spends, or Sandy in my office spends filling out forms and sending out emails and gathering information. But, you know, that's the extent of that.
This goes back a couple of years ago, when Nutmeg Mechanical was washed off of or destroyed, so we wanted to take them off of the Antic River, did we use all FEMA money? Did we use any of our city money for that? I know there were 20 jobs involved in it, and we wanted to keep them, but where did the money come from, if you can recall?
I think it was primarily hazard mitigation funding through, you know, FEMA that goes through the Division of Homeland Security at the state of Connecticut. There were some city funds involved, but it was, I think, largely federal.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Yes.
Is there any way the roof can come out of capital improvement?
It's under 20, what's the threshold for capital improvements, 20?
It's 5,000.
Okay, literally, it could, we put it in operating,
I think the roof isn't the only
yeah. The
fixes
furnace,
that the
there's some
McKinley
other-
Avenue needs in order to be, you know, more usable.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I think that the McKinley Avenue location needs a few more fixes other than the roof in order to become more usable. So I think Chief Scan is looking at doing as much as he can with any funds that are made available to him to make that building more usable.
Anything else? Yes.
Okay, emergency management had, I believe, 3 or 4 vehicles at their disposal. I know that Jean had a vehicle. What's the disposition of those vehicles at this time? Where are they, and who's using them?
They're, two of the vehicles are still there. The individual car that was used by the former director has gone back to the Public Works Department for redistribution at this point.
And the other 3 we're keeping in the
They're
event that we
in-
need to
they're
use
various,
them?
they're used for CERT and other transportating of other people within the department.
Okay, and my other question, and I'm not picking on anybody, but it says percentage of emergency plans updated 100%. And I did see what Chief Scan sent over through an email, and while I appreciate all his efforts on working on these emergency plans, the plan that I got for the police department still listed some employees as the head of department, deputy chief, captain, as people who are no longer employed by the city of Norwich. So I would like to know when the police department emergency plan is going to be updated to reflect the current administration over there.
Duly noted.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we'll finish up with the finance, treasury, and assessor. We'll start first with finance, which is on page 54. No, I can't read, 57, I can't read my writing.
It's actually on 58.
57.
58.
58 is the actual line item.
Thank you.
Since Josh is here, I'll let him discuss his own budget. Where did Josh go? Oh, he left? Oh, there he is, okay.
He's got handouts.
He's
decided-
stealth.
He decided he had enough.
I didn't even hear him.
He's like,
Smoke.
Yeah, he's very stealthy,
yes.
light on his feet.
Ninja finance man.
Good evening. I handed out two things. One of them is just a kind of a bullet point list of the items that the finance department, treasurer, assessor's office do. And the second thing I handed out was in response to a question by President Pro Tem Nystrom. You know, it's actually kind of a good thing to refresh ourselves every once in a while about workers' compensation being fully insured versus self-insured. So I contacted our commercial insurance broker last week, the day after that public hearing, and asked him to get some information together. So that's what this is here. So the finance budget is not changed greatly, except for sharing that one tax position between the city clerk's office and the tax office. That's something that we had done on a less formal basis this year. You know, the revenue collection clerk spent most of their time in the tax office and would occasionally help out Betsy when she was short, if there were people sick or on vacation or something like that. But I think that our collector of taxes and revenues, Carlene Deal, and our city clerk, Betsy Barrett, are very good, reasonable people that can, you know, work out a plan for saying, you know, this is when I need additional staff, and you can have additional staff during these, you know, weeks or months. It's probably not going to be so much someone spending 3 hours in one office and 4 hours in the other office, but spending, you know, whole days or weeks at a time in one place or the other.
Anyone have any questions for the comptroller? Yes.
Okay, Josh. Account 815, professional services. We have $55,600 in there. Typically, what is that account used for?
It's almost entirely the annual financial audit. The total cost of the audit is around $100,000, and it's allocated between the city, Norwich Public Schools, and Norwich Public Utilities. So this is our portion of it.
So that's a third of it? Or it's just,
So our portion of it is
we pay
about
half, they pay 25 and 25?
something to that effect. The city's got a lot of the time-consuming stuff that's part of the audit, more so than public utilities and public schools. We have a lot of grants, several grants of varying sizes, and they're very time-consuming to put through all the audit procedures. So that's most of it. Then there's a little bit that used to be, do you see the line item at the very bottom, the 80115 tax collection services?
Yes.
That's mostly credit card fees, and it was our intention to really press hard on lowering or eliminating the city's cost for credit card processing of tax receipts. And unfortunately, other things that one got put on the back burner while we were transitioning banks and issuing requests for proposals for insurance brokers and employee benefits brokers. It seemed like there was a lot more opportunity to save money with those things, so the credit card thing got pushed off to later. We're still working on that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Yes.
Josh, can you explain to me my pet peeve here, fringe benefits? It's an incredible amount of money and quite a significant increase. You have 12 employees and over $500,000 in fringe benefits?
Yes, it's a lot of money, and you know, as John said, we definitely acknowledge they're expensive, but these are the costs for health insurance, pension, workers' compensation, perfect attendance bonus, FICA, Medicare.
Okay, I have a follow-up, and I thank your office for addressing my questions. Can you tell me, having worked as a personnel administrator in a municipality before, in Massachusetts albeit, our employees were covered by a pension plan, but they certainly were not covered under Social Security. Now, you sent me a figure, I believe, that the city is currently spending $840,000 a year to fund the Social Security. Is this contractual? Is this mandated by the state of Connecticut? Or police and fire do not have FICA taken out of their checks? So
Correct.
can you explain to me why this is?
I don't think that there's, maybe sometime back in the 1950s or 60s, there was an agreement between, I don't know if it was actually statewide or city, or for the city itself, with the Social Security Administration. So all of those non-public safety employees participate in the Social Security.
So, just so that I'm clear, we are contributing a percentage to a pension fund, and we are
Correct.
also contributing, what, 6.2% to Social Security.
Yes.
Is there any way to change that? I know the pension is contractual.
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you said that in the 50s it was some sort of an agreement. Well, here it is 2017. Can we entertain some other agreement? I mean, it's another $1 million.
I mean, I can ask, but that doesn't seem like something that would be possible.
Okay, so other municipalities do the same. They have pensions
Yes.
and Social Security.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Martin.
Workman's comp. My favorite thing that nobody wants to talk about or deal with me about, so I want to deal with it now. When somebody gets injured in the city, does the city perform an investigation?
Let's see, that would be a better question for
I
Bridget
can-
Marks.
Gina, I can answer. It depends on the injury. It can lead to an investigation. Certainly, there's an accident report. The supervisor reviews it for accuracy, making sure that procedures were followed and things like that. So every accident has an investigation to some level. Obviously, some that are much more complicated and higher cost have more elements to it.
Are there incidents where some of our clerical staff has workman comp's injuries?
I have to look that up to tell you.
Yeah, from time to time that happens.
Okay, has an ergonomic assessment ever been performed with these employees, especially the clerical ones that spend like hours on end at their desk?
But we had one in our office a year and a half ago, I believe.
Okay. And have you noticed any improvements since those assessments?
I don't believe our office has had an injury for 8 years or so.
Okay.
So it's been pretty safe there.
How about throughout the city, the guys at the garage, repetitive motion injuries? You see a lot of that show up on, by doing the same task over and over again. You see any of that show up?
Yeah, I don't recall in the loss runs.
You
I'd be
know?
glad to give you a report that shows all the injuries and
What I'm looking for is savings here, and if people are getting hurt doing the same job over and over, somebody needs to examine the job and the process that they're performing to kind of drive these costs down. Because it's not a big investment to do it, but it's a huge benefit to the city because it's like free money, money we don't have to pay. So I just wanted to know if that was being addressed.
Our third-party administrator of workers' compensation claims it's PMA Management, and they look at the types of injuries that are being done and provide suggestions on, like, well, you've got a lot of slip and falls, so let's go take a look at that area and see what could be causing that, or, is it a seasonal issue, or are there trip hazards or things of that nature? So we do have a resource for that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you.
The next budget is treasurer, that's page 61. 61. Other than a slight adjustment in the fringe benefit account, this budget is the same as previous years.
Any questions of the treasurer? Yes, sir.
Only a comment. Thank you
Certainly.
for taking the initiative to seek out another lender in our community if we could get a better rate. I think that was a good initiative for our city. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Finally, page 63, assessor budget. This budget has two major items in it. The largest is the first installment of revaluation. You'll see that that is light item 80015, professional services, and that's $200,000. So if you subtract out 180 out of that, you'll get a comparable number that you could look at for the previous year. The other item, and I consider it major, is the inclusion of an additional staff person in the office, an administrative clerk, which was removed from the budget a few years ago. In 15-16, it was in the budget, then it was deleted, and we're recommending to reinstate it for some of the reasons that were enumerated earlier on in the discussion by the council tonight.
Are there any questions of the assessor? Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ralston, how often do you have the opportunity to go into the field in and around our community to find out about personal property that may or may not be taxed?
I don't have much of an opportunity because I'm stuck in the office.
I don't think
I do go out, but I don't go out as often as I should. My job should be out in the field most of the time, but I can't.
Can you put
I
a
have to do clerical.
Can you put a dollar value to that as to what it may be, what we may be missing out on in our community?
No, I can't because I don't know what we're missing. I can't. I know we're missing a lot. And even in the conversation that you had earlier with the building department, it's been my experience in the last 36 years that if people can't have access to the building department to get permits, they're going to do the work. They're going to do it anyway, without the permit. Who's going to stop them? Who's going to find it? We try to find it. We were trying to find it when we had a full-time clerk. Bill would go online every Monday morning to the MLS listings and look at the properties that were for sale, compare them to what we had on our file, and we found $85,000 in tax dollars last year doing that. Just by him doing that once a week on a Monday morning. You can't do that without a clerk. You can't. We can't operate our office with only 3 people. Comparable towns and cities have 5 full-time people. We were doing it with 4. We cannot do it with 3. Absolutely cannot. you won't get a grand list that's fair or equitable, and that's not what you want in your community. That's not what we need in this community.
Do you send out questionnaires to the companies that are doing business in our community? And do you feel as if they are forthright when they send them back? Is there any way of, any accountability of that?
We did a massive audit over the last couple of years, which brought in $2 million in additional tax dollars. That was eliminated this year, and we're only doing 10, if we have time to get it to them to do. The audit program keeps them honest. It's not that they don't want to be honest.
I know.
Some of them just don't understand how to fill it out. It's extensive. And we had only 60% respond this year, which means we have to file for them.
Can we make that request easier for them?
It's a state, it's pretty much a state, we all use basically the same form because these companies file in every town. They're looking at if they had a different form in every town, it would be worse. So we standardized it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Yes.
Can you tell me what the total cost of the reevaluation will be?
We're out to bid right now, the bid will be next week,
Ballpark?
of $500,000.
And is there any reason, John, why this can't be in the capital improvement budget?
It could be, but it's something that we put because it's professional services rather than a tangible capital item, so it stays within there. But it could go in there, depending how you classify it.
By the way, the young man that works in my office that does my field work, we put in the RFP for the reval that they don't have to do the condominiums because we started this year with Bill going out to every condominium project because they were never done properly, and we had a lot of people complaining. So he's gone out to 2 of them so far and reviewed them all, inspected them all, and resketched them all. So he wants to do the rest of them to make them all the same. And so we've eliminated those condominiums from the reval RFP. But if I don't get the extra person in my office, he's not going to be able to do that.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Happy Easter.
That concludes the departmental budget hearings for this evening. At 7:30, we reconvene for a public hearing, the first public hearing on the city manager's budget.
And we'll take a short break. I believe they want to get the tables moved and bring the benches over. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are having a public hearing about the city manager's budget. We welcome your comments. Please remember to speak clearly into the microphones and state your name and address. And also, if you are here and you wish to speak on the budget but you do not live here, I would like both where you live and where you work. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I think that about wraps it up, and I see everybody seated, so we'll begin. I have 2 people that have signed up. One is Jeff Blinderman.
Good evening. Jeff Blinderman, 35 Greenwich Court, Norwich, Connecticut. Speaking on behalf of the Recreation Department. The manager has proposed a part-time rec director position of 21 hours. We appreciate this as the rec has not had a director for 3 years now. A full-time director would also be beneficial. The manager is proposing a part-time secretary, which is very helpful. The manager is proposing the maintenance staff of 4 workers be moved to the Public Works Department. We feel they need to be housed and supervised by the rec director, and that their functions are dedicated to preparing and maintaining fields and facilities used for rec activities. The rec has rounded out the board, and board members are actively helping the rec to raise funds. On March 18th, we had a 3-on-3 basketball tournament that raised $3,600 for the rec department, and we're also in conversation now with the Harlem Wizards to try to have a winter fundraiser. The rec offers great programs and activities for Norwich. This past summer, we had the largest Splash and Dash Kids Aquathon in the country, and also we brought rec basketball back under our umbrella. And we're offering social activities to special needs adults in addition to many other programs. In the rec basketball league that we brought under our umbrella, over 100 kids participated. On a personal note, I've lived in Norwich my whole life, and I coach youth sports in Norwich because I believe in our youth. And the rec department here needs viability in order to help our underprivileged youth. The rec programs are a far better alternative to what kids will do on the streets without these programs. And the rec department needs proper staffing in order for this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yvette Yosoria? Did I say that right? You were close. Close.
Hi, everyone. My name's Yvette Isordia. I live at 245 Prospect Street, and I'm also an employee. I am the Code Enforcement Secretary of the Building Department. There is a proposal by the city manager to eliminate my position. Of course, I love my job, and I don't want to lose it, but this isn't about me personally. It's about crippling a department that brings in a substantial amount of revenue to the city. Last calendar year, the revenue from building permits alone was over $475,000. I don't understand why the city would want to jeopardize that income by eliminating my position. I do an enormous amount of work in the building department. That plays a big role in creating more time for the inspectors to review plans, inspect properties, advise new businesses and contractors on building codes, and to issue violations and unpermitted work letters. That, in turn, creates revenue for the city and keeps our community safer. There are some people who may feel that the permit program we now have eliminates many of my duties, but that is not true. I am the one who fought extremely hard for a long time to get that program that we now have and will eventually benefit many other departments. Nobody wanted to spend the money, and nobody wanted to make the effort to fight for it. It only initially costed $17,000 versus $100,000. It has come a long way since we got it in 2016, but it also still has a long way to go. With the help of Sandra Kuchka and Dan Coley working daily to improve and implement other modules in the program, not only will efficiency increase, but so will revenue. Has it reduced paperwork? Yes. Does it create better data? Absolutely. But there is more input time to creating that data. Is it scheduling and recording inspections easier? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. The amount of revenue from the building permits is substantial, but so is the revenue from zoning permits, blight, and housing fines. The administrative staff for all these departments is crucial to not only maintaining that revenue, but increasing it. I invite you to contact me or stop by with any questions you may have on what my job entails or what the department does. If requested, I will gladly provide a list of what I do because the current job descriptions are not accurate. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to discuss the budget? Yes, sir?
Samuel Browning, 671 Scotland Road. I also support the idea of at least having a part-time, if not full-time, rec director. I find it kind of strange that, there's towns like Preston, which can at least afford it, a city of, town of about 5,000, and we've gone without for about 3 years. And granted, it's kind of a soft social service. It's not like a social worker, but it does provide a needed service. We have about half of our city employees are either police officers or firefighters, but we can't afford one rec director. You're not going to reach every kid with the same tools. I think this is something which is important to have. And I know that there's also a feeling that, gee, this is just another social program. Would you believe that back in the 1930s, we were providing rec services to youth? That long ago. I mean, this is not something which came about because of the social welfare people, who appeared in the 1960s. This has been a long-time service. Now, I can't tell you if we had a rec director back there, but we were having rec supervisors. And this is something which, I think will, in the aggregate, help head off problems with, youth. And I'd just like to say it now because obviously you have tough decisions to make. And thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on the budget? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Sheila Hayes, 288 Central Avenue here in Norwich. First, I'd like to say that I've attended all of your department budget hearings that you've had to date, so there are still some that have not been held, so we can't discuss the full budget. My concern that I read in the paper that you're looking to have a 5% decrease to the total budget. My concern when we talk in just round numbers or whole numbers is that a 5% decrease in one budget could end up being a major impact versus a 5% decrease in someone else in another department's budget. So I'm going to caution that you please look at what you're asking to be decreased and where you may be looking at those decreases. And I say that because I was here the evening that the Department of Public Works Director was here. And he is not asking for additional staff. As a matter of fact, I believe he said he has taken that department and made it efficient as he can make it, making some changes. What he's looking for is support on monies to help improve the city, the infrastructure, the beautification of it. So if you take 5% out of his department, here of somebody who has made his department efficient and is actually in a position to help turn this city around another corner to benefit what we're looking for, economic development, new businesses, you could end up now destroying exactly what he has spent over a year developing. So I'm cautioning you that way. I have no comment on the school budget because obviously we have no clear understanding as to what the state is doing. I am hoping that the state will do the right thing so our school budget is not impacted because I do not want to see massive layoffs because if you impose a 5% reduction on the school budget, should all the funding not come through again, we're looking at conditions worsening and not improving where inroads have been made. So that is my caution. In closing, I do support the rec department. Yes, I would like to see a director be full-time. That is an area that we are hurting in the city. Whether you talk drugs, just kids hanging out on the streets, juvenile problems. We need to have something for youth in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the budget? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Rodney Boyce, 62 Roosevelt Avenue. I want you to hold the line on the 5%. Years ago, I got up here to speak, and we had 85 police officers authorized for the city. And I asked at that time, did somebody declare war on the city of Norwich? Well, we're now authorized over 100 people. Now, I don't think the police department needs to be sacred, the fire department either. We have a large staff of both items. I can't comment on the education budget because, as you say, we don't know what the governor's going to do yet. But we need to rein in the spending in this city. One way or the other, you need to rein the spending in because it is cost prohibitive. There's no sense in having a beautiful city if you can't afford to live there, you can't afford to bring business here, you can't afford to bring your kids here. Or they look someplace else to go and buy a house or a home. They move to Preston or some other place, or move out of state altogether. When I was a senior in high school, the whole damn class moved right out of state. None of us stayed in the state for 20 years. Now, I understand taxes. Been doing taxes ever since about that high. My father was the first selectman. I've told you people this before. I can't remember when I wasn't confronted with budgets, school budgets, and things of that nature there. So, good government is one thing, and it's nice to have efficient departments and stuff working fine and all of that kind of thing. But we have at some point got to cut back on the expenses of running this city. And if it means a cut to police or fire, then go ahead and cut it. Someplace it's got to happen. You people are the ones to do it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak about the budget? Yes, sir.
My name is Xiaodong. I'm the ex-resident now, but I still have property in there, Norwich. I came here to support the 5% reduction of their budget. I think this is only the baby step to go that direction, because recently I just participated in the Groton, which is I'm living now. They were forced to close one school. And last year I went there to ask them to do the same thing. They refused. They end up with increase the tax 6%. And this year, they were forced. They have to do it, because otherwise they're going to increase 25%. So everybody is going to revolt there. The Norwich right now is in there. I understand. I got incensed by reading one newspapers in the Norwich bulletins about that overtime. This is why I come here. Tomorrow morning at 2 o'clock I'm going to work, but I'm still come here to say that 8% of your employees, 8%, so 84 people, get over 100K in these cities. Most of it is caused by the overtime. I don't know whether it's still going on or not. These sort of things. I go to Google, just take me a few minutes. I searched. There was the same population town, which is Fredericksburg, near that Worcester, a north of Worcester. They have the police forces. They only have about 20% less than here. They have the same population, almost the same area, like the same as Norwich, you know, and there. So that sort of things that I just remind you, council members. You are a wise man, a wise woman, and everybody, you know, this is the Norwich Bulletin that do a good job. Otherwise, we don't know this. Okay, and I don't know whether anything has improved or not. The efficiencies, they're otherwise. So I don't feel, you know, I moved up, but I still feel. There's one thing reminds me. There's this, you take 10% from the MPU. That's the MPU's their profit came to the Norwich budget. But I think that is not fair for the ratepayers, because you pay the most of that 10% is go to their general fund, is for the government employees, and some of them does not live here. They should not, and 80% of those monies go to their salaries.
Thank
That's
you,
what
sir.
the things. Okay.
Thank you
That
very
is
much.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak about the budget? Yes.
Good evening. Abby Dolliver, 6 Deepwood Drive. It was just a week ago that I stood here during our budget hearing to talk about several things that I wanted to celebrate about our school district. Some of the state and federal honors included 2 schools of distinction as determined by our standardized testing, a National Blue Ribbon School nominee, a National Magnet School of Excellence, a network school awarded its fourth year based on our history of having successful network schools, I mentioned how chronic absenteeism, our rate has come down at a notable rate, one of the best successes in the state, so much so that we're having a visit by the commissioner and the governor to celebrate our success with our improved attendance. I also mentioned our growth in student achievement as measured by standardized testing. This is notable. On this past Sunday, 11 of our students brought their inventions to the Invention Convention Regional Finals. Many students brought their inventions. 11 were selected to be in the state competition. That's really exciting for our students. So in a time when our district is often criticized for being expensive, for not quite being good enough, when we are all struggling with budgets, I understand that, I really want to take a moment to celebrate our students and staff because I think we don't do that often enough. We often become mired down in negativity and worry about budgets, and I understand it. With 50% of our staff being grant funded, it's a continual worry. We all have very, very difficult decisions ahead, and our staff and students work really hard every day to make us proud, to shine a positive light on Norwich, and to give back to our community. Our staff do that and our students on a regular basis. We shouldn't be blamed for some of Norwich's challenges, but we should be partners in the work together to bring our community and move us forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak about the budget tonight? And this, again, I'll remind you, is the manager's proposed budget. Anyone wishing to speak about the proposed budget? Yes, sir.
John Blackburn, 15 Alice Street. I've lived here in Norwich all my life, born and raised here. Now this budget here is not a good one. It's going to be raising taxes again. And I just read in the paper today, the day I happened to pick it up, where you want to reduce it 5%. That should have been done years ago. And now all of a sudden it's hitting now. And we don't know exactly what the state is going to give as far as funding. And it's the unknown factor. But the mill rate is high. It does need to be reduced. Where you're going to reduce it, how you're going to reduce it, that is going to be a hard thing to do. But you have services, you have the schools, and we need all of them. But the line has to be drawn somewhere, and unfortunately, you people have a tough job to do. And whatever you can do to reduce that mill rate, it would be a help. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak about the budget? This is the city manager's proposed budget. Anyone else wishing to speak about the budget? Anyone else wishing to speak about the budget? All right. Thank you all very much. The public hearing is closed. And I thank you all for your comments. And when is our next public hearing?
Monday.
Monday?
No, Monday's a
No,
regular
Monday's a
council.
regular council.
Oh, Monday's regular.
Well, we'll post it on the website.
No, we have a departmental hearing Monday at 6:30 with the Otis Library.
But there's a library has.
Yep, yes, but not a public hearing
No,
on the
the
budget.
next
I'm sorry,
public hearing is May
hearing
8th.
would be
May 8th is the next public hearing.